My name is Eleanor Brooks, and I am 65 years old. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house that has seen 3 generations of my family pass through its doors. For decades, I thought I had built a life filled with love, respect, and tradition. But all of that came crashing down the day my own daughter looked me in the eye and called me a burden. "You're just a burden now," Vanessa sneered as she yanked the car keys from my trembling hands. "You can't even drive without shaking. And these," she plucked my credit cards from my purse with a satisfied grin, "are better off in my wallet than yours. You won't be needing them." Her words cut through me like a knife. A burden? After all the nights I spent rocking her feverish body as a child. After all the years I sacrificed to give her an education. After all the meals I skipped so she could eat better when times were hard. Now I was just a burden? But Vanessa didn't know what I had done that morning. She didn't know that while she was still sleeping off her late-night drinking, I had called my attorney and moved every last penny of my $3 million fortune into the name of someone who had never once disrespected me. My housekeeper, Rosa. Vanessa walked out of the house, my keys jingling in her hand, my credit card stuffed into her back pocket, a cruel smile stretching across her face. She had no idea that when she tried to swipe those cards, they would scream declined. She had no idea the accounts were frozen, untouchable to her greedy fingers. She thought she had won, but the game had only just begun. And when the truth hit her, I knew it would shake her to her core. Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Let me know where you are watching from. You don't know, you might be lucky to get a shout out on our next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you like stories like this. Now, let me take you back to where it all started, because betrayals like this don't happen overnight. They build slowly, like cracks creeping through a wall until finally the whole thing caves in. I wasn't always alone. My husband, Richard, was the love of my life. A quiet man, strong in spirit if not in words. He passed away 5 years ago after a long fight with lung cancer. Losing him left me broken, but what helped me survive was the thought that at least I still had Vanessa, my only child. She was my reason to keep going, or so I thought. After Richard's funeral, Vanessa began visiting more often. At first, I was grateful. She helped me sort through his things, cooked meals, even stayed overnight when the silence of the house felt unbearable. But slowly, her visits became less about me and more about what she could take. "Mom, I need a little loan. Just until payday." "Mom, can I borrow your car? Mine's acting up again." "Mom, can you cover my rent? You know I'll pay you back." The paybacks never came. The loans grew larger. And somewhere along the way, my daughter stopped being a daughter and started being a leech. The housekeeper, Rosa, saw it before I did. Rosa had been with me for nearly 20 years. She was more than an employee, she was family. She made soup when I was sick, sang while she dusted, and prayed quietly for me when she thought I wasn't listening. One afternoon, after Vanessa had stormed out when I refused to give her another $1,000, Rosa touched my arm gently. "Senora Eleanor," she said in her lilting accent, "you need to be careful. Miss Vanessa, she does not see you. She only sees what she can take." I wanted to deny it, but deep down I knew Rosa was right. The real breaking point came 2 weeks before the morning I froze my accounts. Vanessa had come into the house without knocking, her eyes red from crying, or maybe drinking. She went straight for the liquor cabinet, poured herself a glass, and slumped on the couch. "I'm broke, Mom," she said flatly. "I need $50,000. I nearly dropped the dish I was holding." "50,000? Vanessa, I don't have that kind of money lying around." "You do," she snapped. "Dad left it all to you. Don't play dumb." My heart clenched. "That money is for my future, Vanessa. For my care if I get sick. For keeping this house running. It's not a piggy bank for you." She glared at me with such coldness that for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own child. "You don't need $3 million, she spat. "You're old. You'll be dead in a few years anyway. Why not let me use it now?" Those words burned into my soul. Old. Dead in a few years. Just a burden. That night, I cried myself to sleep. But when the morning came, my tears had hardened into resolve. I called my lawyer and made the transfer. Every account, every dollar, every investment moved into Rosa's name. with strict instructions that she was to use it only for my care, and when I passed, for the charitable causes Richard and I had always dreamed of supporting. By the time Vanessa swaggered in that afternoon, my future was safe. And then came the moment, the sneer, the snatched keys, the stolen cards, and now, as I sat in my quiet kitchen sipping tea, waiting for the storm I knew was coming, I felt both fear and triumph swirling inside me. What would Vanessa do when she realized she had no power over me anymore? What would she say when the bank doors slammed shut in her face? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Because that night, just as the sun was dipping behind the Charleston harbor, the front door burst open. Vanessa came storming inside, her face twisted in rage, her eyes wild. She slammed my credit cards down on the table, so hard the sound made me jump. "What the hell did you do, Mom?" she shouted, her voice shaking the walls. Vanessa's face was a storm, her cheeks flushed, her lips twisted, her eyes spitting fire. She slammed the cards against the oak table, so hard that the teacup beside me rattled and tipped over, spilling brown liquid across the lace tablecloth. "What the hell did you do, Mom?" she screamed, her voice cracking, but not from sadness, no, from rage. I sat frozen in my chair, my heart thudding so loudly in my chest I was sure she could hear it. My trembling fingers tried to mop up the tea with a napkin, anything to avoid meeting her eyes. But she wasn't about to let me hide. "Answer me," she shouted, grabbing the edge of the table and shaking it. "I went to the mall. I tried to buy a few things. Declined. Declined. I went to the bank. Do you know what they told me? They said the account was locked." "Locked?" Her voice lowered, but the fury in it sharpened like a knife. "Where is the money?" I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry as dust. "Vanessa, the money is safe. That's all you need to know." Her laugh was harsh and ugly, echoing through the kitchen. "Safe? Safe from me. I'm your daughter. You're supposed to trust me. Instead, you humiliate me at the bank like some kind of thief. Do you have any idea how that felt?" For a flicker of a moment, guilt twisted inside me. But then I remembered her words. "You'll be dead in a few years anyway." I sat a little straighter. "You don't need to know where it is," I said softly but firmly. "It's not yours to spend." Her hands clenched into fists. She leaned across the table, her face inches from mine. "You're going senile, aren't you? That's what this is. You're losing it, and now you're making terrible decisions. Maybe I should get the courts involved. Maybe I should have you declared incompetent." The words chilled me to the bone. My own daughter, threatening to strip away my independence, my dignity. Before I could speak, a voice cut through the tension. "Enough." Rosa stood in the doorway, her small frame steady, her dark eyes fierce. She rarely raised her voice, but now it rang out with authority. "You do not speak to your mother this way. Not in her home." Vanessa whipped around, her hair flying like a whip. "Stay out of this, Rosa. You're just the maid." Rosa's jaw tightened. "I am more family than you are right now." The words landed like a slap, and I saw Vanessa's eyes widen with shock. But then her face hardened again, and she turned back to me. "You'll regret this, Mom," she hissed. "You'll regret making me the enemy. You think you're protecting yourself? You think locking me out will save you? No, this isn't over." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, my hands trembling, staring at the spilled tea that had dried sticky on the tablecloth. My daughter, my only child, had just threatened to drag me into court and declare me incompetent. Rosa moved quietly, fetching a cloth, dabbing at the mess. "Senora Eleanor," she said gently, "do not let her break you. You did the right thing." But did I? My heart ached. I remembered Vanessa as a little girl, running barefoot through the garden, her laugh ringing like bells. Where had that child gone? Had I lost her forever to greed and selfishness? That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every gust of wind against the window made me think Vanessa was outside, plotting her next move. The next morning, Rosa tried to cheer me with fresh baked bread and strong coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and comforting. For a few moments, I allowed myself to believe everything might calm down. But calm wasn't in Vanessa's nature. By mid-afternoon, the phone rang. When I picked it up, a man's stern voice greeted me. Mrs. Brooks? This is Officer Daniels with the Charleston Police Department. We received a call from your daughter regarding possible financial abuse. She claims someone has taken advantage of your accounts. My stomach dropped. Financial abuse? That's not true. I made those transfers myself. Ma'am, we'll need to come by and take a statement. I hung up, my hand shaking. Rosa was by my side in an instant. What is it? She's gone to the police, I whispered. She's trying to make it look like someone tricked me. Rosa's eyes widened. Madre de Dios. It was one thing for Vanessa to scream at me in private. It was another to drag the law into it. Suddenly, this wasn't just family drama, it was a war. 2 hours later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 uniformed officers standing on the porch. Behind them, leaning against her car with her arms crossed and a smug smile plastered on her face, was Vanessa. My knees nearly gave out. Mrs. Brooks, one officer said kindly, we just need to ask you a few questions. Rosa hovered behind me like a guardian angel, her hand firm on my shoulder. I invited them in, my mind racing. If Vanessa thought she could twist the law to her advantage, she was in for a surprise. Because I had proof, documents, signatures, witnesses. My attorney had made sure of it. But still, the humiliation of having the police in my home because of my own daughter burned deep. As the officers began their questions, Vanessa smirked from the corner, her eyes gleaming with triumph. And then one of the officers turned to me and asked the question that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Brooks, is it true that you transferred over $3 million to your housekeeper, Rosa Alvarez, just this week? The officer's words seemed to echo in the room, bouncing off the walls until they pressed against my chest like a weight. Mrs. Brooks, is it true that you transferred over $3 million to your housekeeper, Rosa Alvarez, just this week? I felt Rosa stiffen behind me, her hand tightening on my shoulder. Vanessa smirked from her corner, her arms crossed, her whole body vibrating with smug triumph. Yes, I said, forcing my voice to be steady. That's true. I moved the money myself. I signed the papers. I called my attorney. It was my choice. The younger officer exchanged a quick glance with his partner. Ma'am, your daughter has expressed concerns that you may have been pressured into this decision, that perhaps Ms. Alvarez unduly influenced you. That's a lie. I cut in sharply, the tremor in my voice betraying my fear. Rosa has never once asked me for money. She has been by my side for 20 years. She's more loyal than... My words caught in my throat, and I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence. More loyal than me? Vanessa said, her voice dripping with venom. She stepped forward, her face a mask of false innocence. Mom, I'm only trying to protect you. You're not thinking clearly. Dad left that money to you, to the family, and now it's just gone. Gone to someone who actually cares about me, I whispered. Her face hardened, the mask slipping for just a moment before she turned back to the officers. See, she doesn't know what she's saying. She's confused. $3 million doesn't just disappear to a maid unless something's wrong. Rosa's dark eyes flashed with fury. She stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. I have never taken a cent from Senora Eleanor. She made her decision freely. Ask her lawyer. He will tell you. The older officer cleared his throat. That's exactly what we intend to do. Mrs. Brooks, would you be willing to provide us with your attorney's contact information? Yes, I said quickly, grabbing a notepad from the counter. My hands shook as I scribbled down the number. Please, call him. He'll explain everything. The officers took the note, thanked me politely, and said they would follow up. As they turned to leave, Vanessa tried to follow them out, but not before leaning close to me and whispering through clenched teeth. This isn't over. When the door finally closed, I sagged into a chair, my legs trembling as though I'd run a marathon. Rosa moved silently, placing a warm hand on mine. Do not worry, Senora, she said softly. The truth will protect us. I nodded, though doubt gnawed at my insides. The truth wasn't always enough. Vanessa had charm when she wanted to. She had lies ready on her tongue, and she knew how to twist things to her advantage. What if the law believed her? That night, I barely touched my dinner. Rosa fussed over me, urging me to eat, but I couldn't. My appetite was gone, replaced by a knot of dread in my stomach. I sat at the kitchen window long after Rosa had gone to bed, watching the streetlight glow, wondering how my own flesh and blood had turned into such a stranger. 2 days later, my lawyer, Mr. Whitman, called. His voice was calm, reassuring, the voice of a man who had handled messy family dramas before. I spoke with the police, Mrs. Brooks. They were satisfied with the documentation. The transfers were legal, properly signed, and notarized. There's no case here. Relief washed over me like a wave. But before I could even thank him, he added, "But Eleanor, your daughter isn't finished. She's already been calling other attorneys in town. She's looking for someone to file for guardianship over you." My stomach dropped. Guardianship? You mean she wants the court to take away my rights? Yes, he said gently. She'll argue that you're not capable of managing your finances. If she succeeds, she could control your accounts, your house, everything. The room spun around me. Guardianship. The thought of Vanessa having that kind of power over me made my blood run cold. What do I do? I whispered. Stay calm, he said. We'll fight it. You're competent, and you have medical records to prove it. But Eleanor, brace yourself. These cases can get ugly. When I hung up, Rosa was waiting in the doorway, her brow furrowed with worry. I told her everything. She didn't flinch, didn't panic. She only straightened her back and said, "Then we will fight." Her strength steadied me. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The next week passed in a blur of lawyer visits and whispered phone calls. Mr. Whitman arranged for me to see my doctor, who confirmed in writing that I was of sound mind. He also had me write a personal statement explaining why I had moved the money to Rosa's care. Still, the weight of Vanessa's betrayal pressed heavy on my chest. At night, memories of her childhood haunted me. The way she used to curl up beside me with a storybook, the way she'd slip her tiny hand into mine at the grocery store. I kept asking myself the same question. Where did I go wrong? Rosa tried to keep the house filled with light. She played soft music while she worked, cooked meals that reminded me of simpler times, and always reminded me to pray when despair crept in. Without her, I think I would have collapsed under the strain. Then, one evening, as I was sitting in the living room sorting through old photo albums, the phone rang again. It was Mr. Whitman, and his tone was urgent. Eleanor, I need you to listen carefully. Vanessa has filed for emergency guardianship. That means she's asking the court to place you under her control immediately, before a full hearing. If the judge agrees, she could show up at your house tomorrow with legal papers and take everything. My hands went cold, the photo album sliding from my lap to the floor. Tomorrow? But that's impossible. I've done nothing wrong. Which is why we'll fight it, he said firmly. But we need to prepare. I'll come by first thing in the morning with the paperwork we'll submit. Until then, keep calm. I hung up the phone, my body trembling. Rosa came rushing in, alarmed by the look on my face. What happened? I looked at her, tears spilling down my cheeks. She's trying to take me away, Rosa. She wants to have me declared unfit. Tomorrow she might come with papers to drag me out of my own home. Rosa's eyes blazed with fury. Over my dead body. The house was quiet after Rosa went to bed, but my mind was a storm. I paced the halls, touched the furniture Richard and I had picked out together, ran my hand along the pictures on the walls. Would all of this be taken from me by my own child? As midnight approached, I sat by the window, staring at the moonlit street. That was when I noticed the shadow. A figure moving slowly across the lawn. My heart leapt into my throat. It was Vanessa. She wasn't supposed to be here, not tonight, not before the court had even decided. And yet, there she was, creeping toward the house, something metallic glinting in her hand under the streetlight. The shadow moved across the lawn, the moonlight catching in her hair. Even from the window, I recognized the proud, defiant tilt of her chin. It was Vanessa. My pulse hammered in my throat, and I pressed a hand against the cool glass. What was she doing here at this hour? And what was that glint in her hand? Was it a flashlight? A tool? Or something worse? I froze, hardly daring to breathe as she crouched by the side of the house. I heard a faint scraping sound. My heart sank. She wasn't here to talk. She was trying to break in. I stumbled back from the window, my breath quick and shallow. My first thought was to call the police, but then fear tangled with shame. How could I explain that my own daughter was sneaking into my home like a thief in the night? The floor creaked softly behind me. Rosa had woken, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her robe tied tightly at the waist. "Señora Eleanor," she whispered. "What is it?" I raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the window. She peered out, then gasped. "Madre de Dios." "She's trying to get in," I whispered, my voice shaking. Rosa's face hardened, her protective instinct sparking to life. "Stay here. Lock your bedroom door. I'll handle this." "No." I grabbed her arm. "It's not safe. She could be dangerous." Rosa's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. Together, we crept down the hallway toward the kitchen, where a back door opened onto the yard. We heard another scrape, then the faint click of metal on glass. Vanessa was trying to force the window open. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. The operator's calm voice steadied me as I explained. "My daughter, she's trying to break into my home. Please, you have to send someone quickly." Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens cut through the quiet night. Vanessa's head jerked up, and for a split second, our eyes met through the glass. Her expression was wild. Anger, desperation, something unhinged. Then she bolted across the lawn, her silhouette disappearing into the shadows just as the police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, flashlights sweeping across the yard. Rosa met them at the door, while I stayed rooted to the floor, my heart pounding. "She was here," Rosa explained quickly. "We saw her. She tried to break in. The officers searched the yard, but of course she was gone." One came back holding a slim piece of metal. "Looks like she dropped this." He held up a lockpick tool, the kind burglars use. My knees buckled. My daughter hadn't come to talk. She had come prepared to break into her own mother's house. After the officers left, Rosa guided me to bed like a fragile child. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind a storm of memories and pain. How had Vanessa fallen so far? What had I done or failed to do that had brought us to this point? By morning, the house was heavy with silence. Rosa brought me tea, her face pale but determined. "We must tell Mr. Whitman," she said firmly. "He needs to know what she tried." I nodded. There was no hiding anymore. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was criminal. Mr. Whitman was furious when I told him. "She's not just threatening guardianship anymore. She's escalating. If she keeps this up, she could face charges. But Eleanor, you must understand, she won't stop until she either gets what she wants or the law stops her." His words were like a stone in my chest. For a few days, things were quiet. Vanessa didn't call, didn't come by, didn't harass me. I allowed myself to believe she might have been scared off by the police. Maybe she finally realized she couldn't bully me anymore. But peace never lasts long when someone's desperate. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I received the letter. Delivered by certified mail, stamped with the Charleston County Court seal. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It was official. Vanessa had filed for emergency guardianship. There was a court date set for the following week. I sank into a chair, the papers slipping from my hands. Rosa picked it up, her eyes scanning quickly before she set it down with a scowl. "She will not win," she said. "We have proof. We have your doctor. We have your lawyer." But my voice cracked as I whispered, "What if the judge believes her? What if I lose everything?" Rosa knelt in front of me, her hands clasping mine. "Then we fight harder. You are not alone." The week leading up to the hearing was torture. Each day, I felt the weight of dread pressing down on me. Rosa stayed close, never letting me face the silence alone. She prayed with me at night, cooked meals I couldn't eat, reminded me to breathe when panic gripped my chest. Finally, the day came. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue suit Richard had always loved. Rosa pressed a rosary into my palm before we left. At the courthouse, my knees nearly buckled when I saw Vanessa waiting outside the courtroom. She looked polished, confident, her hair pulled back neatly, her clothes crisp. Standing beside her was a sharp-looking attorney in an expensive suit. When her eyes met mine, she smirked. Inside the courtroom, the judge called the case. My name. Vanessa's name. The words felt heavy, surreal. Vanessa's attorney stood first, painting a picture of a vulnerable elderly woman manipulated by a greedy housekeeper. He spoke with smooth conviction, twisting every detail into something ugly. She moved $3 million in a matter of hours, he said. Does that sound like the action of a sound mind? Or does it sound like someone being taken advantage of? Vanessa nodded along, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a concerned daughter. Then it was our turn. Mr. Whitman stood tall, his voice steady as he laid out the truth. He produced the documents, the notarized transfers, the letter from my doctor confirming I was of sound mind. He explained how Rosa had worked faithfully for decades, never once asking for a dime. Finally, he invited me to speak. My legs shook as I rose, but Rosa's steady gaze gave me courage. I am not incompetent, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I made the decision to protect myself. My daughter has not treated me as family in years. She has treated me like a bank account. And when I refused to give her what she wanted, she turned cruel. That is why I made my choice. Not because I was forced, but because I was tired of being used. The courtroom was silent when I finished. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Brooks, I am placing this matter under advisement. But in the meantime, I am issuing a temporary order. All of your financial accounts will remain frozen until I make a final ruling. The judge's words rang in my ears long after we left the courtroom. All of your financial accounts will remain frozen until I make a final ruling. It was as if the ground beneath me had cracked open. I'd worked my whole life alongside Richard to build security, to build comfort for our family, and now, with one sentence, it was locked away. Untouchable. Vanessa strutted past me in the courthouse hallway, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. She leaned close enough that only I and Rosa could hear. Looks like you're not in control anymore, Mom, she whispered, her lips curling into a cruel smile. Enjoy living off scraps. Rosa bristled, her fists clenching, but I caught her arm before she could speak. Don't, I whispered. That's what she wants. Vanessa smirked and walked away, her expensive perfume lingering in the air like poison. The next days were humiliating. When I tried to pay for groceries, my card was declined. When I went online to pay the utility bill, the website rejected the transaction. Even my modest pension was caught up in the freeze, tangled in the same net as the rest of my accounts. I had never felt so powerless. Rosa stepped in quietly, covering the cost with her own modest savings, refusing to let me go without. She filled the pantry, kept the lights on, and never once complained. But I saw the exhaustion in her eyes. She worked long hours cleaning other people's homes, yet she still came back to mine and made sure I was cared for. The guilt gnawed at me. I had meant to protect her, not burden her. One night, as she served me a steaming bowl of chicken soup, I broke down in tears. This isn't fair to you, Rosa. You shouldn't have to spend your money on me. She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. Senora Eleanor, family is not always blood. You protected me by putting my name on that money. Now it is my turn to protect you. Please let me do this. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket, soothing the ache in my heart. Meanwhile, Vanessa grew bolder. She began showing up at the house unannounced, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with flowers, pretending to play the role of the dutiful daughter. But I saw through her act. You don't have to pretend, I told her one afternoon as she set a bag of apples on the counter. I know why you're here. You're waiting for the court to rule in your favor. She gave me a wide-eyed look of mock innocence. I'm just trying to help, Mom. You can't even pay for your own food right now. Doesn't that prove I was right all along? You need me. I need honesty, I snapped. Not manipulation. Her smile faltered for just a moment before she covered it with a laugh. Suit yourself. But soon you won't have a choice. The stress began to take a toll. I woke up with pounding headaches, my hands shook more than usual, and some nights I couldn't sleep at all. Rosa tried to keep me strong, but I could see the worry in her eyes too. Mr. Whitman reassured me we had a strong case. The freeze is temporary, he said. We'll prove you're competent, and the judge will lift it. But Eleanor, you need to brace yourself for more tricks. Your daughter won't back down easily. He was right. Vanessa wasn't done. One evening, just as Rosa and I were settling in with tea and a puzzle on the dining table, there was a loud knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. When Rosa opened it, 2 uniformed men stepped inside, holding clipboards. Mrs. Brooks, one of them asked. Yes. My voice shook. We're here from Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you may not be receiving proper care in your home. I stared at them, stunned. What? That's not true. I'm fine. The man's eyes flicked to Rosa. Ma'am, are you Miss Alvarez? Yes, Rosa said firmly. We'll need to speak with both of you separately, the other man said. We've been told there may be neglect, possibly even exploitation. My knees went weak. I didn't need to ask who had made the report. It had Vanessa's fingerprints all over it. As one of the men led me into the living room, the other guided Rosa into the kitchen. My heart pounded as I sat down, staring at the clipboard in the man's hands. This wasn't just a court battle anymore. Vanessa was trying to paint Rosa as an abuser, to tear apart the only real support I had left. And if APS believed her lies, they could separate me from Rosa, take me out of my home, put me in a facility for my safety. The thought chilled me to the bone. The man cleared his throat and looked me straight in the eye. Mrs. Brooks, he said, I need you to tell me honestly, are you being forced to stay here against your will? The man's question cut straight through me like a blade. Mrs. Brooks, are you being forced to stay here against your will? I blinked at him, stunned. Forced? No, absolutely not. This is my home. Rosa has been nothing but good to me. He scribbled something on his clipboard, his expression unreadable. Sometimes, victims of neglect or exploitation feel pressured to defend their caregivers. I need you to be completely honest with me. Is Ms. Alvarez taking your money? Is she withholding food, medication, or communication with your family? I leaned forward, my voice rising with panic. You don't understand. Rosa is the only one keeping me alive right now. If it weren't for her, I'd be starving in the dark. She's the one buying groceries, paying the bills, keeping me safe. She has sacrificed her own money for me. His eyes softened a little, but he kept writing. And your daughter? Vanessa. My throat went dry. She's the one who called you, isn't she? He hesitated. I can't disclose who made the report. But what I can tell you is this. If we find that Ms. Alvarez is mismanaging your care, we have the authority to remove you from this home for your safety. The blood drained from my face. That was exactly what Vanessa wanted. In the kitchen, Rosa was being questioned too. I could hear the muffled voices through the wall, though I couldn't make out the words. I imagined Vanessa's accusations twisted into lies, claiming Rosa was controlling me, isolating me, taking advantage of me. My hands shook so badly that I clasped them together in my lap to keep from looking weak. The man in front of me glanced up from his notes. We'll also need to see your medications, your pantry, and your sleeping arrangements. This is standard procedure. Of course, I said quickly. Please, look at anything you want. Rosa has nothing to hide. For the next hour, the 2 men combed through the house. They checked my pill bottles, counted the tablets, and compared them to the prescription dates. They opened cabinets, examined the fridge, even peered into closets. Rosa stayed calm, answering every question with dignity. She offered receipts, showed them the bills she had paid from her own account, and even pulled out her pay stubs to prove her income. I watched her, my chest swelling with both pride and sorrow. She shouldn't have to defend herself like this. She had already endured so much in life, immigrating to a new country, working endless hours to survive, and now my own daughter was dragging her through this. When the men finally finished, they exchanged glances. One of them closed his folder with a sigh. Mrs. Brooks, Ms. Alvarez, he said. At this time, we don't see evidence of neglect. In fact, quite the opposite. You appear to be well cared for. We'll be filing a report that reflects that. Relief washed over me so strong my knees nearly buckled. Rosa placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, her eyes glistening. But the man wasn't finished. That said, he continued, given the ongoing legal disputes, we'll be scheduling follow-up visits. If anything changes or if new reports are filed, we'll have to investigate again. I knew exactly what that meant. Vanessa wasn't done. She would keep calling, keep stirring trouble until she got what she wanted. Later that night, I sat in the living room with Rosa, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You shouldn't have to go through this because of me." Rosa shook her head firmly. "No, Senora Eleanor. Don't you dare apologize. This is not your fault. This is your daughter's choice, and I will not let her win." Her voice was so fierce, so unwavering, that for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Still, I knew the battle was only getting harder. Vanessa had tried the courts, and now she was using government agencies. What would be next? The answer came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, Mr. Whitman called me with urgency in his voice. "Eleanor, we have a problem." My stomach clenched. "What now?" "Vanessa has filed a motion with the court. She's demanding that you undergo a psychiatric evaluation to determine your competency. If the judge agrees, you'll be required to sit for a formal mental health exam. Depending on the results, the court could place your finances and even your living arrangements under guardianship." The room spun around me. Guardianship. That meant I could lose control of everything. Not just my money, but my freedom. "She's trying to make me look crazy," I whispered. "I'll fight this," Whitman said firmly. "But you need to prepare yourself. If the judge orders the evaluation, we can't refuse. And Eleanor, these tests aren't always fair. They can be twisted, misinterpreted." My chest tightened, and I clutched the phone until my knuckles turned white. Vanessa wasn't just trying to steal my fortune anymore. She was trying to erase me as a person. And if she succeeded, I would no longer be Eleanor Brooks. I'd just be a ward of the court. The word guardianship echoed in my mind long after Mr. Whitman hung up. Guardianship wasn't just about money, it was about power. If the court decided I was unfit, they could take everything. My bank accounts, my home, my freedom, even my right to decide where I lived. And the cruelest part? They could hand all of that control to Vanessa. I sat frozen in my armchair, my tea growing cold on the table beside me. Rosa hovered nearby, her brow furrowed in concern. "What is it, Senora?" she asked softly. I forced the words out, my throat tight. "Vanessa wants me declared incompetent. If she gets her way, I'll be nothing more than her property." Rosa's face hardened, her dark eyes flashing with fury. "No, we will not let that happen. You are strong, you are smart, and you are more capable than she ever was." Her words warmed me, but deep inside, fear gnawed at my heart. I had seen how quickly courts could be swayed when money was involved. Vanessa knew how to play the victim, how to twist stories into lies that sounded believable. And if the evaluation didn't go in my favor, my life as I knew it would be over. Mr. Whitman scheduled an emergency meeting at his office in downtown Dallas. Rosa drove me, her hands gripping the wheel tightly as if the force of her determination alone could keep me safe. Inside Whitman's office, stacks of papers and legal books crowded the shelves, but his desk was immaculate, a sign of his methodical mind. He gestured for us to sit, his face grave. "I filed an objection to Vanessa's motion," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But the judge will likely grant it anyway. These evaluations are standard in cases like this. Our goal isn't to avoid it, it's to pass it with flying colors." I swallowed hard. "And if I don't, then the court could strip you of financial control, possibly even appoint Vanessa as your guardian." Rosa slammed her hand on the arm of her chair. "That cannot happen. She is the one who should be questioned, not Senora Eleanor." Whitman gave her a sympathetic look. "I agree. But right now, the burden is on us to prove Eleanor's competency." He leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "Eleanor, you need to prepare. They'll test your memory, your reasoning, your ability to handle finances. They'll ask personal questions designed to trip you up. But you can do this. I've seen plenty of people your age pass these evaluations easily." I nodded, trying to muster courage. "Then I'll be ready." The days leading up to the evaluation were some of the hardest of my life. Rosa quizzed me every evening, asking me dates, phone numbers, and riddles. Whitman provided sample financial problems for me to solve. At times I stumbled, forgetting a small detail, mixing up a date, and panic would claw at my chest. But Rosa would squeeze my hand and remind me, "You are capable. You are more than capable." Still, nightmares haunted me at night. I dreamed of sitting in a sterile office while strangers wrote on clipboards, judging every word I spoke. I dreamed of being led away in handcuffs while Vanessa smiled from the sidelines. The fear was relentless, but beneath it, something stronger began to stir. Defiance. I would not let my daughter erase me. The morning of the evaluation arrived gray and cold. Rosa laid out my best navy blue dress, pressed and neat, with a silver brooch Richard had given me years ago. "You look powerful," she said with a smile as she fastened the brooch. "Like a woman who cannot be broken." I tried to believe her. At the psychiatric office, the evaluator, Dr. Green, greeted me with a polite smile. He was a tall man in his 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through me. "Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming," he said, leading me into a quiet room. A recorder sat on the table between us. "This evaluation will help the court determine whether you are capable of managing your personal and financial affairs. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said firmly. For the next 2 hours, he peppered me with questions. Dates, addresses, names of family members, math problems, hypothetical scenarios, memory exercises. Some questions were easy. Others made me pause, my mind scrambling for the right words. Each time I hesitated, I pictured Vanessa's smirk and forced myself to push through. When it was finally over, Dr. Green closed his notebook. "Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. The court will receive my report within the week." My knees trembled as Rosa helped me to the car. The waiting would be unbearable. That evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun sink low over the Texas horizon. Rosa brought me a cup of chamomile tea, her quiet presence grounding me. But the peace didn't last. My phone buzzed, and when I answered, Vanessa's voice dripped through the line like acid. "Hope you enjoyed your little test today, Mom," she sneered. "Don't get too comfortable. Soon, you won't have control over anything, not your money, not your house, not even yourself." I clenched the phone so tightly my hand ached. "You can try to take everything from me, Vanessa, but you'll never take my dignity." She laughed cruelly. "We'll see." And then the line went dead. 3 days later, Mr. Whitman called again. I braced myself as I answered. "Eleanor," he said, his voice grave. "I've received Dr. Green's preliminary notes. The evaluation went well, very well. But—" my breath caught. "But what?" "There's been a development. Vanessa isn't waiting for the report. She's filed an emergency petition claiming you're a danger to yourself, and the judge has scheduled a hearing tomorrow morning." My stomach dropped. "A danger to myself? That's a lie." "I know," Whitman said. "But if the judge believes her, he has the authority to remove you from your home immediately. You could be placed in a care facility while the case continues." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. A facility. A strange place with strangers controlling my every move. Vanessa wasn't just threatening my fortune anymore. She was threatening my freedom. The phone slipped from my trembling hand and clattered onto the table. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear Rosa calling my name. "A danger to myself," I whispered. The words felt poisonous in my mouth. Vanessa was accusing me of being unstable. So unstable that a judge might order me locked away in some facility against my will. Rosa knelt beside me, her hand squeezing mine. "Listen to me, Senora Eleanor. That is not true. You are strong. You are sharp. Vanessa is afraid because she knows she is losing. But fear not at me. I knew how quickly lies could take root in people's minds, especially when dressed up in legal language. If Vanessa had painted me as a frail, confused old woman, would the judge believe her? The next morning, Rosa drove me to the courthouse under a sky heavy with storm clouds. Mr. Whitman met us on the steps, his suit immaculate, his face stern. "We have one goal today," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "To show the judge that you are capable, rational, and fully aware of your life and choices. Speak clearly. Be honest. Don't let Vanessa rattle you." I nodded, though my knees shook beneath me. Inside the courtroom, Vanessa sat at the petitioner's table with a smug smile, flipping through papers as though she had already won. She wore a navy dress and pearls, the picture of a respectable daughter. I knew it was an act. The judge entered, a tall man with silver hair and a gavel that echoed through the room as he called the hearing to order. "Ms. Brooks," he began, glancing at Vanessa, "you have filed an emergency petition alleging that your mother is a danger to herself. Please present your evidence." Vanessa rose, her voice dripping with false concern. "Your Honor, my mother has been increasingly erratic. She forgets basic things. She refuses necessary medical care. She isolates herself and refuses to let family help her. I am deeply worried for her safety. If she continues like this, I fear she could harm herself, accidentally or otherwise." I wanted to leap up and shout that it was all lies, but Whitman squeezed my arm, urging patience. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Whitman, your response?" Whitman stood smoothly. "Your Honor, these accusations are unfounded. Mrs. Brooks is of sound mind, as confirmed by her recent psychiatric evaluation. She is well cared for, not by her daughter, but by Ms. Rosa Alvarez, a longtime employee and trusted companion. The petitioner, unfortunately, is attempting to manipulate the court in order to gain control of her mother's finances." The judge raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious claim, Mr. Whitman." Whitman nodded, "and one we are prepared to prove." The judge called me to the stand. My legs felt like lead as I walked forward, but Rosa's encouraging smile steadied me. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. "Mrs. Brooks," the judge said, "are you aware of why we are here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "My daughter is trying to declare me incompetent so she can control my life and my money." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa's face flushed crimson. The judge asked me questions about my health, my daily routine, even what medications I took. I answered carefully, recalling every detail Rosa had drilled into me. I explained how Rosa bought groceries, how I still balanced small household decisions, and how I kept up with news and community events. When the judge asked about my finances, I explained calmly that I had legally transferred my fortune into Rosa's name to ensure it would be safe. "And why not to your daughter?" the judge asked. I looked directly at Vanessa. "Because she called me worthless. Because she took my keys, my cards, and treated me like a burden. I cannot trust someone who sees me as an obstacle instead of a mother." Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Vanessa's eyes widened, fury flashing across her face. When my testimony ended, Vanessa was given a chance to cross-examine me. She stood, her smile brittle. "Mother," she said sweetly, "do you remember last week when you called me late at night, crying, saying you couldn't find your medication?" I frowned. "That never happened." She tilted her head. "Are you sure? Maybe you just forgot." "I remember very clearly," I snapped. "And I never made that call." "You're lying." The judge's gavel struck once. "Ms. Brooks, keep your questions factual." Vanessa bit her lip, defeated, and sat back down. Finally, the judge leaned back in his chair, considering everything he had heard. "This court has reviewed the evidence and testimony," he said at last. "At this time, I see no grounds to declare Mrs. Brooks a danger to herself. The petition is denied." Relief flooded through me so strong I nearly wept. Rosa covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Whitman gave me a small, proud nod. But Vanessa wasn't finished. As the judge prepared to dismiss the case, Vanessa stood abruptly. "Your Honor, one more thing. I have documents, proof, that my mother has been financially manipulated by her housekeeper. I request those documents be entered into the record immediately." The judge frowned. "What documents?" Vanessa pulled a thick envelope from her bag and handed it to the bailiff. My blood ran cold. What lies had she conjured this time? The bailiff carried the envelope to the judge, who opened it with deliberate care. The sound of paper sliding out seemed deafening in the quiet courtroom. Vanessa sat tall, her chin lifted proudly as if she'd already won. "These," she said, her voice dripping with triumph, "are copies of bank withdrawals and checks written in large amounts, signed over to Rosa Alvarez. I believe they show a clear pattern of financial exploitation." My breath caught in my throat. I had signed those checks. I had authorized every transfer. but in Vanessa's hands, they looked like evidence of theft. The judge adjusted his glasses, skimming the documents. "Mr. Whitman," he said, "how do you respond to this?" Whitman rose smoothly, though I could see the tension in his jaw. "Your Honor, these transactions were legitimate. Mrs. Brooks made them knowingly, transferring assets into Ms. Alvarez's name as part of her estate planning. We have notarized paperwork to prove it." Vanessa scoffed. "Oh, please. My mother is confused and vulnerable." Rosa took advantage of her trust. Everyone knows caretakers do this all the time. I wanted to leap from my chair and scream the truth, but Rosa's steady hand on my shoulder held me back. She sat silently, her dark eyes full of dignity, even as Vanessa slandered her. The judge studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he set them down. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "did you willingly sign these transfers to Ms. Alvarez?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Every single one." "And why?" "Because she earned my trust. Because she treated me with kindness when my own daughter treated me like a burden. That money was mine to give, and I gave it freely." The judge tapped his pen against the bench. "Very well. I'll take these claims under advisement." Vanessa's face twisted in frustration, but she wasn't done. "Your Honor," she said quickly, "I request that until this matter is resolved, Rosa Alvarez be barred from having access to my mother's accounts or assets." For her safety, my stomach dropped. If the judge agreed, Rosa could lose access to the very money I had entrusted to her. Whitman shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This request is premature and baseless. There is no evidence of wrongdoing. If anything, Mrs. Brooks has benefited from Ms. Alvarez's support while her daughter attempted to strip her of independence." The judge sighed, clearly weighing the request. "I will consider a temporary injunction," he said slowly, "pending review of the documents." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. "This hearing is adjourned. We'll reconvene in 1 week." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. I turned to Rosa, panic clawing at my chest. What if he believes her? What if he takes it all away from you? Rosa squeezed my hand gently. "Then we fight harder. Together." But I saw the shadow in her eyes. Even Rosa was afraid. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with humidity, thunder rumbling in the distance. Vanessa brushed past us, her perfume cloying. She leaned close enough that only I could hear. "You can fight me all you want, Mother," she hissed. "But sooner or later, the judge will see the truth. And when he does, Rosa will be out of your life for good." She straightened, plastered on a sweet smile for the reporters lingering by the steps, and walked away as though she had already claimed victory. That night, I sat awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts churned. If the judge barred Rosa from my finances, how would I protect her? How would I protect myself? Vanessa would swoop in, circling like a vulture, eager to take control the moment Rosa was removed from the picture. The idea of losing Rosa's presence, her comfort, her loyalty, it made my chest ache more than the thought of losing my fortune. I made a silent vow then and there. No matter what, I would not let Vanessa win. The next morning, Whitman called with a grim update. "I've looked over Vanessa's documents. They're real copies of checks and withdrawals, but she left out context, like the notarized transfer agreement you signed. Still, if the judge sees only her version, it could sway him. What do we do?" I asked, gripping the phone tight. "We counterattack," he said firmly. "I'll file a motion to admit the full notarized agreement into evidence. And Eleanor, it might be time to prepare for witnesses. People who can testify to your competency and to Rosa's character." Witnesses. My heart lifted slightly. I wasn't alone. My neighbors, church friends, even Rosa's employers, they all knew the truth. "Yes," I said. "Let's do it." For the next several days, Rosa and I gathered names and phone numbers. Mrs. Carter from across the street agreed to testify that I still managed my garden and chatted with neighbors daily. Pastor Miller said he'd vouch for my sharp memory of scripture. Even Rosa's former employer wrote a statement about her honesty and dedication. Piece by piece, we built a wall of truth to stand against Vanessa's lies. But just when I began to feel hope, the phone rang again. It was Whitman, his voice tight. "Eleanor, I just received notice. Vanessa has filed a new motion, one that could change everything. My stomach nodded. What is it this time? She's asking the court for emergency guardianship, on the grounds that Rosa is financially exploiting you and isolating you from your family. If the judge grants it, Vanessa could gain temporary control immediately. The room spun. Temporary guardianship. That meant Vanessa could lock me out of my own accounts, even kick Rosa out of the house, while the case dragged on. Rosa's face went pale as I repeated the news to her. She grabbed my hands, her voice trembling. If she wins this, Senora Eleanor, she can take everything. Right away. And for the first time in this long, bitter fight, I felt true terror sink its claws into me. When Whitman told me about Vanessa's emergency motion, it felt as though the ground had crumbled under my feet. Guardianship wasn't a small thing, it was total control. If Vanessa won, she would have the legal right to run my life, my house, my money, even my medical choices. It would be like handing the wolf the keys to the chicken coop. Rosa sat at the kitchen table across from me, wringing her hands. Senora Eleanor, if the judge believes her, she can take everything from you before the case is even decided. Her voice shook, and the sight of her fear stabbed at my heart. She wasn't afraid for herself, she was afraid for me. I reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. Listen to me, Rosa. We've come too far to give up now. If she wants a fight, we'll give her one she'll never forget. Whitman wasted no time. The next morning, he arrived at the house with a leather briefcase full of papers. He spread them out across the dining table like a general laying out battle plans. Here's what we're up against, he said, tapping a copy of Vanessa's petition. She claims you're no longer competent to manage your finances, and that Rosa has isolated you from family while siphoning off your wealth. I bristled. Isolated? I've been begging Vanessa to visit me for years. She only shows up when she wants something. Whitman nodded. Exactly. Which is why we'll need to prove not only your competence, but also your independence. I've scheduled a neurocognitive evaluation with Dr. Jensen tomorrow. She's a respected physician. Her testimony will carry weight. Rosa leaned forward. And what about me? How do I defend myself? By letting Eleanor defend you, Whitman said kindly. The court needs to hear that she made these decisions freely, that you didn't coerce or manipulate her, and we'll reinforce that with witnesses. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The thought of standing in front of a judge again so soon made my stomach churn, but I knew Whitman was right. If I didn't fight, Vanessa would win by default. The evaluation with Dr. Jensen was almost comforting. She was a warm woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She asked me to remember a list of words, draw a clock, and answer questions about the date, the president, and current events. When she asked me to recall the words later, I rattled them off without hesitation. Apple, chair, river, candle, truck. Her smile widened. You've got an excellent memory, Mrs. Brooks. Better than some of my patients 20 years younger. By the end, she leaned back in her chair and scribbled notes. From what I see, you're perfectly capable of making your own financial and personal decisions. I'll put that in my report. Relief washed over me like cool water. One weapon to use against Vanessa's lies. The day of the emergency hearing arrived with storm clouds looming over Raleigh, the sky a dull gray. Rosa and I walked into the courthouse side by side, Whitman striding confidently ahead of us. Vanessa was already there, dressed in an elegant navy suit, her hair styled perfectly. She looked like she was headed to a fashion show rather than a courtroom. She smirked when she saw me. Ready to embarrass yourself again, mother? I didn't answer. I just held Rosa's hand tighter. The hearing was shorter than the last trial session, but twice as tense. The judge took his seat, glancing between us. We are here to consider a petition for emergency guardianship filed by Ms. Vanessa Brooks. Vanessa's lawyer, a slick man named Kramer, stood first. Your Honor, my client is gravely concerned for her mother's well-being. Mrs. Brooks has demonstrated confusion and poor judgment, evidenced by the reckless transfer of her life savings to a housekeeper. These funds, worth millions, are now at risk of mismanagement or disappearance. Ms. Brooks fears that unless guardianship is granted, her mother will be left destitute. He sat, satisfied with his performance. Whitman rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, The claim that Mrs. Brooks is confused or incompetent is simply false. We have a neurocognitive evaluation from Dr. Helen Jensen, a respected physician, completed yesterday. The results show that Mrs. Brooks is fully capable of managing her affairs. He handed a copy to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. The judge skimmed the report, his eyebrows lifting slightly. Whitman continued. Furthermore, Mrs. Brooks's decision to transfer her assets to Ms. Alvarez was intentional and well documented with notarized agreements. She did so because Ms. Alvarez has proven herself loyal and trustworthy, unlike the petitioner who previously abandoned her mother at a nursing home. Guardianship is not only unnecessary, it would place Mrs. Brooks's welfare in the hands of the very person who mistreated her. Vanessa's face darkened, her lips pressed into a thin line. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Brooks, I want to hear from you directly. Do you understand the nature of the financial decisions you made regarding your assets? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. I transferred my money to Rosa Alvarez because she is the only person who has stood by me. My daughter sees me as a burden. Rosa treats me with dignity. It was my choice and I stand by it. Vanessa shot to her feet. She's lying. She's been manipulated. Rosa probably coached her on what to say. The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, Miss Brooks. For a moment, silence filled the courtroom. Then the judge spoke. I have reviewed the petition and the evaluation. While I acknowledge the petitioner's concerns, I am not convinced that Mrs. Brooks is incapable of managing her affairs. However, that single word made my stomach drop. I will order a temporary freeze on large financial transactions until this matter is resolved. Ms. Alvarez may continue to provide care, but no assets may be transferred or liquidated without court approval. My chest tightened. A freeze. It wasn't guardianship, but it was a dangerous compromise. Rosa wouldn't lose everything, but the safety net I built for her was locked away, at least for now. Vanessa's smile widened, victory glinting in her eyes. And I realized with horror, this was only the beginning. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my head long after we left the courthouse. A freeze. Not guardianship, but not freedom either. I walked down the steps of the courthouse clutching Rosa's hand, the humid North Carolina air pressing down on us. Rosa tried to sound calm. At least he didn't give her guardianship. That was what we feared most. But I shook my head. This is almost worse. The money is locked. If anything happens, you won't be able to touch it. And Vanessa knows it. Across the street, Vanessa stood with her lawyer, laughing as if she'd just won the lottery. When her eyes met mine, she didn't bother to hide her grin. She mouthed 2 words before climbing into her car, you'll see. A chill ran through me despite the heat. The days after the ruling were like walking on eggshells. Bills arrived, and though Rosa still had her modest savings, she refused to let me touch it. This is yours, she insisted. I'll manage. She took extra shifts cleaning houses, working herself to exhaustion just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. Watching her scrub strangers' floors while my millions sat frozen in the bank was a torment I wouldn't wish on anyone. One night, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, head in her hands. Rosa, I said softly, this isn't right. I put that money in your name to give you peace, not hardship. She looked up, her eyes tired but determined. And we'll get it back. But even if we don't, I'd rather be poor with you than rich with a heart like your daughter's. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Vanessa, of course, didn't waste time exploiting the freeze. She began showing up uninvited, strutting into my front yard as if she owned it. One morning, she arrived with a clipboard and 2 men in polo shirts. What is this? I demanded, stepping onto the porch. An inspection, she said smoothly. The court needs to know you're safe here. Mold, wiring, all that. Whitman, who had come by to check on us, immediately intervened. Absolutely not. Unless the judge orders it, you have no right to enter this property. Vanessa's smile faltered, but she covered it quickly. Fine. But if something happens to her in this house, the court will know who's responsible. She left with her men, but not before turning to Rosa and whispering loud enough for me to hear. Enjoy your little vacation while it lasts. Soon, you'll be out on the street. Rosa's hands shook as she closed the door behind them. I hugged her tightly. We'll outlast her, I whispered, though in my heart fear gnawed at me. For every low moment, though, there were flashes of hope. One came in the form of an old friend, Mrs. Carter from across the street. She knocked on our door one afternoon carrying a casserole dish. I heard about the freeze, she said gently. Vanessa's been bragging all over town. Heat rushed to my cheeks. Of course she has. Mrs. Carter leaned in, her voice firm. Don't you worry. Folks around here know the truth. We've seen how Rosa cares for you. If you need anything, rides, groceries, testimony, you've got us. Her words lifted a weight from my chest. It reminded me that Vanessa's poison didn't spread everywhere. Some people still saw clearly. Whitman, meanwhile, strategized nonstop. The key, he explained one evening, pacing the living room, is to demonstrate that the freeze causes undue hardship. We'll file a motion to release limited funds for living expenses. Judges sometimes allow that, especially with evidence. What kind of evidence? I asked. Receipts, overdue bills, proof Rosa's using her own money to support you. The court doesn't want an elderly woman living in poverty while her assets sit untouched. Rosa bit her lip. But what if Vanessa argues I'm still exploiting her? Whitman's smile was tight, but reassuring. Then we counter. The truth is on our side. Vanessa's overplayed her hand. As if to prove his point, Vanessa's behavior grew bolder and sloppier. She began leaving nasty voicemails, accusing Rosa of brainwashing me, calling her a thief, even threatening to drag her back to Mexico if the judge didn't act. Whitman had me save every single message. This is gold, he said, eyes gleaming. Evidence of harassment and prejudice. Exactly what the court needs to see. Still, the messages made Rosa cry quietly in her room at night. I'd sit outside her door, aching with helplessness, wishing I could shield her from the cruelty. The motion hearing for living expenses came 2 weeks later. The courthouse was colder this time, the air conditioning blasting against the sticky heat outside. Whitman presented receipts, overdue notices, even Rosa's pay stubs. Your Honor, he said firmly, Mrs. Brooks is living modestly while her assets remain frozen. Ms. Alvarez is bearing the burden alone. This is exactly the kind of hardship a freeze should not cause. Vanessa's lawyer scoffed. Ms. Alvarez is crying poverty while sitting on $3 million. She wants access so she can drain the accounts before trial. The judge frowned. Enough. I'll allow limited withdrawals for living expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries. Nothing more until we conclude this case. Relief swept through me like a breeze. It wasn't full freedom, but it was something. Enough to breathe again. But Vanessa didn't take the partial loss quietly. As we left the courthouse, she stormed past us, her heels clicking like gunfire. She paused at the door, her voice low and venomous. You think you've won something? You haven't seen anything yet. Next time, I'll bring proof that'll bury you both. I felt Rosa stiffen beside me. What proof? She asked. Vanessa's smile was sharp and cruel. You'll find out soon enough. And with that, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving us shaken and wondering what new storm she was preparing to unleash. The house felt heavy that night. The shadows seemed to stretch across the walls as if Vanessa's words had left an imprint that refused to fade. She's going to try something, Rosa said quietly, her hands trembling as she folded laundry. I can feel it. She won't let this go. I nodded, though I felt my chest tighten with dread. Vanessa had always thrived on fear. She had spent years controlling, manipulating, and undermining me, and now she had found the legal means to continue her attacks. We have to be ready, I whispered. Whitman said every threat she makes can be countered with evidence, and I need you with me, Rosa. Always. She nodded, determination flickering in her dark eyes. Always. The next day, Whitman arrived with his briefcase and a determined look. I've filed motions to allow testimony from friends and neighbors, he explained. We'll show the court the truth about your competence and Rosa's loyalty. And Vanessa? I asked, dreading the answer. She's already submitting her proof, Whitman said grimly. I've seen a copy. It's tricky, but it's mostly documents taken out of context, statements that make ordinary transactions look suspicious. Rosa's hands clenched. They can twist anything. Whitman nodded. Exactly. But we'll counter every one of them. Remember, the truth is on our side. And sometimes, perception is stronger than fear. We'll manage both. 2 days later, the hearing was set. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. Vanessa strutted in, her usual smug expression plastered across her face. She waved her proof in front of the court, a thick manila folder labeled with bold letters. Whitman gave me a reassuring glance. "Stay calm, Eleanor. We'll handle this." The judge began the session. "We are here to review the latest submission from Ms. Vanessa Brooks regarding alleged mismanagement of assets and potential undue influence." Vanessa's lawyer leaned forward. "Your Honor, we present evidence that Ms. Alvarez coerced Mrs. Brooks into transferring funds and has isolated her from family. These documents, emails, letters, and bank transfers show a pattern of exploitation." My stomach sank. Emails and letters? I knew some were personal notes between Rosa and me, completely innocuous. But in Vanessa's hands, she could twist them into lies. Whitman stood immediately. "Your Honor, these documents are entirely misleading. Each transfer was authorized, notarized, and the correspondence shows clear consent and understanding by Mrs. Brooks. We'll present supporting testimony from witnesses who can verify this, including neighbors, friends, and professionals who have observed Mrs. Brooks's decision-making." Vanessa snorted audibly, whispering something to her lawyer. Her confidence made my hands shake. I clutched Rosa's hand under the table. The judge, a tall man with a measured expression, looked over the folder. "Let's begin with the key documents. Ms. Brooks, I may ask you to clarify these for the record." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The first document was an email from me to Rosa, dated months ago. Vanessa's notes claimed I was urging Rosa to handle my money because I couldn't think for myself. I cleared my throat. "Your Honor, that email was about paying bills and arranging groceries. I trusted Rosa to help me, yes, but I understood everything. I chose to delegate not because I was incapable, but because I needed assistance. That is very different from being manipulated." The judge nodded slowly. The next document was a bank transfer form. Vanessa's lawyer called it proof of undue influence. Whitman stood, pointing to the notarized agreement. "Your Honor, every transfer was legal, voluntary, and documented. Mrs. Brooks is fully competent. We can produce witnesses who observed these transactions and can attest to her understanding." Vanessa's lawyer tried to interject, but Whitman held up his hand. "No interruptions, Your Honor. Let the record reflect the context before any conclusions are drawn." As the hearing dragged on, Vanessa grew more desperate. She produced letters from supposed financial advisors claiming Rosa coerced me. But Whitman calmly dismantled each one, calling witnesses and presenting notarized contracts, bank statements, and testimony proving my full awareness. I marveled at his skill, but exhaustion weighed heavily on me. My throat was raw from speaking, my hands cramped from clenching Rosa's, and yet I pressed on. Rosa, meanwhile, was a rock. She never wavered, never flinched. Her quiet presence lent me strength I hadn't realized I had needed so badly. Finally, after hours of testimony, the judge called a brief recess. We stepped into the hallway, Rosa clutching my arm. "I think we're doing well," I whispered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Whitman shook his head slightly. "We are, but Vanessa isn't finished. She's arranging something bigger. I just got word. She's planning to bring in a private investigator to testify tomorrow. Someone who claims to have evidence that Rosa is secretly misappropriating funds." Rosa's eyes widened. "A private investigator?" Whitman nodded gravely. "Yes, and they're claiming they have evidence that could make the court question your competency again, Eleanor. This could undo everything we've done." My chest tightened. Fear coiled around me like a snake. Every step forward felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon. One misstep and everything, my freedom, my fortune, Rosa's safety, could tumble away. Vanessa's threats had always been shadowy before. Now, they were materializing into a real, dangerous presence in the courtroom. And I realized with a sinking feeling that tomorrow's hearing could change everything. The courtroom was colder than usual that morning, the air conditioner humming ominously. Every eye seemed to be on us as we waited for the private investigator Vanessa had promised. Rosa gripped my hand tightly, her knuckles white, and I felt my own heart hammering in response. Whitman whispered, "Stay calm. No matter what, we respond with truth. The judge will see through exaggeration." I nodded, though fear coiled around me like ice. The door opened, and a tall man in a gray suit entered, carrying a briefcase overflowing with files. He had a sharp, calculating expression that made my stomach drop. Vanessa's lawyer waved him forward. "Your Honor, we call Mr. Leonard Harris," Vanessa's lawyer announced. "He is a private investigator who has conducted a thorough review of Mrs. Brooks's financial transactions and household activities. He will testify that Ms. Alvarez has taken advantage of Mrs. Brooks and misappropriated her funds." I felt Rosa squeeze my hand even harder. Whitman stood calmly. "Your Honor, we object to the credibility of Mr. Harris. His investigation is biased and commissioned by a party with a vested interest in the outcome. But we are prepared to address any factual claims he makes." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Mr. Harris began with a long, dry recitation of alleged irregularities. "In reviewing Mrs. Brooks's accounts, I found several transfers to Ms. Alvarez without accompanying documentation for specific purchases. There were gaps in ledgers and invoices. These, in my professional opinion, indicate a pattern of financial exploitation." Vanessa's eyes glimmered with satisfaction. My heart sank. Could it be true? Had I unknowingly given Rosa too much control? Whitman leaned over and whispered, "Stay calm, Eleanor. Remember, every transfer was authorized, notarized, and lawful. We have witnesses. Trust the process." I nodded shakily. Rosa, for her part, remained silent, her face a mask of concentration. She whispered, "It's okay, Senora Eleanor. Just breathe. He can say anything, but we know the truth." Whitman then began cross-examination, his voice measured but firm. "Mr. Harris, did you personally witness any of the transfers in question?" "No," Harris said. "I only reviewed documents provided by the petitioner." "Were you aware of the notarized agreement signed by Mrs. Brooks transferring funds to Ms. Alvarez?" Harris shifted uneasily. "I saw some of the documents, yes, but I was not aware of the full context." Whitman's eyes narrowed. "So, your entire investigation is based on incomplete information provided by a party with a vested interest?" Harris hesitated, his voice faltering. "Yes, but—" "Nothing further," Whitman said smoothly. "Your Honor, the investigator has no independent evidence. He only repeats the petitioner's narrative." The judge leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Noted. Mr. Harris, do you have any first-hand accounts or witnesses, aside from the documents you reviewed?" Harris shook his head. "No, Your Honor." Vanessa's jaw tightened. Her confidence faltered for the first time in months, and I felt a spark of hope. Whitman seized the moment. "Your Honor, we call Ms. Martha Carter, a longtime neighbor and friend of Mrs. Brooks, to testify regarding her awareness of Mrs. Brooks's decision-making abilities and Ms. Alvarez's role." I held my breath as Mrs. Carter stepped forward. She was small, elderly, and filled the room with warmth and quiet authority. "Ms. Carter," Whitman asked, "can you describe your observations of Mrs. Brooks over the past few years?" Mrs. Carter nodded. "Certainly. Eleanor has always been sharp, alert, and capable. I see her daily. She balances her garden budget, handles phone calls, keeps track of appointments, and makes her own decisions. Miss Alvarez assists her, yes, but always with Eleanor's permission. She has never coerced Eleanor in any way." The courtroom murmured. Even the judge's lips twitched as if intrigued. Next, Whitman called several more witnesses: a local pastor, a former employer of Rose's, and even a neighbor who had once observed a check being signed and confirmed Eleanor's understanding of the transfer. Each one bolstered the truth. Eleanor had acted with full knowledge, and Rosa had only facilitated her wishes. Vanessa's face grew red, her hands trembling as Whitman methodically dismantled every accusation Harris had made. Finally, Whitman addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, what the petitioner calls exploitation is, in fact, careful planning and delegation by a competent adult. Mrs. Brooks has chosen to reward loyalty and kindness. The freeze and these accusations are punitive and unfounded. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge reviewed the testimony and evidence. Vanessa's shoulders slumped slightly, her smirk gone, replaced with frustration and disbelief. Then the judge leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I have considered the evidence presented by both parties. While the temporary freeze remains in effect, this court finds that Ms. Brooks is competent to manage her own affairs. Furthermore, there is no evidence to suggest Ms. Alvarez has acted improperly or without consent. Relief washed over me. For a moment, I felt as if the weight of the world had lifted. But before the room could relax, the judge added, his voice lower and deliberate. However, due to the complexity of the case and the number of disputed transactions, I am ordering an independent audit of all transfers made over the past year. This audit will be conducted by a court-appointed accountant and must be completed within 30 days. I froze. 30 days. Vanessa's threat of investigation was now real, sanctioned by the court. Whitman leaned over, his jaw tight. This audit could reveal nothing, but it also gives Vanessa another weapon. We need to prepare meticulously. Rosa squeezed my hand, her face pale but determined. We faced worse, Senora Eleanor. We'll get through this too. But deep inside, I felt a creeping unease. The stakes had risen higher than ever. Vanessa's next move would not just threaten my fortune. It could shatter the fragile peace we had been fighting to protect. The week after the judge's decision felt endless. Every knock on the door, every phone call made my stomach twist with worry. The court-appointed accountant was coming to audit every single transfer I had made to Rosa over the past year. Rosa and I sat together at the kitchen table. Stacks of bank statements, receipts, and notarized agreements spread in front of us like a fortress. I've never seen so many papers in my life, Rosa muttered, flipping through a ledger. Her hand shook, but her eyes were fierce. If they try to spin this, we'll have proof to show it's all legitimate. I nodded, though a small part of me trembled. Vanessa had already been relentless, and now the court had officially sanctioned another layer of scrutiny. I couldn't help but imagine her circling us like a vulture, ready to pounce on the tiniest misstep. Whitman arrived mid-morning, his briefcase heavy with folders. I've reviewed everything, he said, setting them down. The audit will be thorough, but I've flagged all the documents that show the transfers were authorized and legal. You and Rosa just need to stay calm and organized. If the accountant sees the full picture, Vanessa's accusations will fall apart. I nodded, trying to internalize the reassurance, but the unease lingered. Every time I glanced at Rosa, I felt guilty that she had to shoulder so much stress for my sake. The auditor arrived 2 days later, a tall man named Mr. Caldwell with a clipboard and an expression that made my hands sweat. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself beyond the professional greeting. Good morning, he said, voice flat. I'll be reviewing all financial transactions made by Mrs. Brooks over the last 12 months. Please have all documentation ready. We handed over everything. Every check, every transfer, every note from Rosa explaining a purchase. I felt exposed, my life and trust on display under the sharp eyes of a stranger. Vanessa, of course, was there too, sitting at the back of the room with her lawyer. She whispered into his ear, smiling every time the auditor scribbled notes. I could feel her glee like a weight pressing down on my shoulders. This is going to be the end of us, Rosa whispered, barely audible. No, I said firmly. This is just another step. We've come this far, Rosa. We can handle this too. For 2 days, Mr. Caldwell went through every document, every bank transfer, every note. He asked questions, took notes, and occasionally looked up with a frown that made my heart pound. Vanessa leaned forward, eyes glinting. I caught her mouth forming the words, "See? I told you." Whitman guided us through it, calmly explaining each transaction's purpose. This is exactly what we prepared for, he whispered. He will see that everything was legal and consensual. Stay confident. Rosa nodded, drawing strength from Whitman's confidence, but I could see the strain on her face. She hadn't slept well, hadn't eaten properly. I wanted to shield her from this torment, but all I could do was hold her hand and promise silently that we'd make it through. Then came the night before the final audit review. Vanessa called, and my stomach sank when I saw her name on the caller ID. Hello, mother, she purred. I see your little housekeeper has kept you busy. How sweet. But you know it won't matter in the end. The auditor will find things, little things you missed. And when they do, well, let's just say you'll regret choosing loyalty over family. Her words were venom wrapped in silk. Rose's hands clenched mine. Don't listen to her. We have the truth. That's all we need. But I felt a shiver of fear creep in. Vanessa wasn't bluffing. The audit could reveal something, anything, that could turn the tide against us. The following morning, we arrived at the courthouse for the audit review. The room was tense, every official present, including Vanessa and her lawyer. Mr. Caldwell began to speak, detailing his findings. At first glance, he said, some transfers appeared unusual. But upon reviewing the notarized agreements, bank statements, and supporting documentation, it is clear that all transactions were authorized and legitimate. There is no evidence of exploitation. A wave of relief surged through me, and I saw it reflected in Rose's eyes. Vanessa's lawyer rose to protest, but Whitman stood first. Your Honor, as you can see, there is full documentation of Mrs. Brooks's intent and awareness. This audit confirms that no wrongdoing occurred. The judge nodded, scanning the auditor's report. Noted, this confirms that Mrs. Brooks acted with understanding and that Ms. Alvarez did not engage in any improper activity. Vanessa's jaw tightened, and I felt a moment of triumph. It seemed like the end, but just as we began to relax, Vanessa stood abruptly, slamming her folder on the table. Your Honor, she cried, there is one more piece of evidence. A letter recently discovered, supposedly written by Mrs. Brooks herself, expressing intent to transfer funds to Ms. Alvarez under questionable circumstances. It was overlooked. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. My heart froze. Whitman's eyes narrowed. Your Honor, we request to review this document immediately. Preliminary inspection shows it to be a forgery. Vanessa's smirk returned, sharp and cruel. Forgery? We'll see what the court decides. But if this letter is legitimate, it proves everything I've said. The audit can't erase intent. The judge held up his hand, silencing the room. We will review the letter, but I caution all parties to maintain decorum. This hearing is not concluded. I felt Rose's grip tighten on my hand. Her eyes were wide, terrified. Whitman leaned over, whispering urgently. This letter could change everything. We need to examine it closely. If Vanessa tries to use it, we'll need immediate expert analysis. I swallowed hard. Fear surged through me. After all the victories, all the careful preparation, Vanessa had found, or claimed to have found, a new weapon. And the final showdown was only hours away. The courtroom was silent, tense, as the judge held Vanessa's letter in his hands. My stomach twisted in knots, and Rose's grip on my hand was ice cold. The air seemed to press down on us, thick with anticipation. Vanessa's eyes glittered with triumph. This letter, she said, voice sharp, shows Mrs. Brooks was coerced by Miss Alvarez. She transferred funds under influence, knowing she might regret it. I felt my chest tighten. Every night of planning, every moment of stress, and now this one piece of paper threatening to unravel everything. Whitman leaned close, whispering, "Stay calm, Eleanor. We've anticipated this. Trust me." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I would not let fear control me. Not now. Not after everything. The judge adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Brooks, I will allow you to speak regarding this letter before any determination is made. I stood slowly, feeling Rose's eyes on me. I drew in a deep breath and addressed the court. Your Honor, I wrote that letter months ago, but it was never meant to be interpreted in the way my daughter claims. It was part of a draft I was working on for personal reflections, not financial instructions. I understand why it could be misleading, but every transaction, every transfer was made knowingly, willingly, and with full consent. Vanessa's jaw tightened. She tried to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. Whitman stood next. Your Honor, we have a forensic document analyst prepared to testify. The signature on that letter is not genuine. It is a sophisticated forgery. We can prove it beyond any doubt. The courtroom murmured. Vanessa's smirk faltered. The forensic expert, a calm man named Mr. Langley, took the stand. He examined the letter under magnification, pointing out inconsistencies in pressure, ink distribution, and letter formation. The signature differs from Mrs. Brooks's verified signatures, he explained. The timing and strokes indicate it was forged by someone attempting to mimic her handwriting. Vanessa's face drained of color. That's impossible. Whitman shook his head slightly. Not impossible, Miss Brooks. It's called forgery, and it appears to have been submitted to manipulate the court. The judge tapped his gavel. Noted. If this letter is a forgery, it has no bearing on the case. The court will disregard it unless new evidence proves its authenticity. I felt Rosa's fingers squeeze mine, a wave of relief washing over us both. But the drama wasn't over yet. Vanessa's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, the petitioner requests an investigation into the housekeeper, claiming she has manipulated Mrs. Brooks's financial decisions for personal gain. Whitman turned calmly, voice firm. Your Honor, that is baseless. We have witness testimony, notarized agreements, and bank records proving full knowledge and consent from Mrs. Brooks. Ms. Alvarez has acted only as a trusted assistant, nothing more. The judge studied the documents, then leaned back. Given the forensic evidence and the comprehensive documentation of transfers, the court finds no evidence of undue influence or exploitation. All funds remain legally and rightfully Mrs. Brooks's to manage as she sees fit. A wave of triumph surged through me. After months of fear, sleepless nights, and relentless attacks, justice had prevailed. Vanessa sat frozen, mouth agape. Her lawyer whispered frantically, but it was clear the tide had turned. Whitman leaned toward us, whispering, It's over. She can no longer touch you or Rosa legally. The assets are secure, and any further attempts at harassment can be reported to the court. Rosa let out a shaky laugh, tears streaming down her face. We did it, Senora Eleanor. We really did it. I hugged her tightly, my heart full. We did it together, Rosa. You've been my rock through all of this. None of this would have been possible without you. Later, outside the courthouse, the sun was bright, washing the streets of Raleigh in warm light. Vanessa had stormed off, defeated, her threats and smirks finally powerless against the truth. I turned to Rosa. I want you to have peace now, Rosa. All this, my fortune, my trust, was always meant for you, for your loyalty and your kindness. Never forget that. Rosa smiled, eyes glistening. And I will honor it always. You saved me, Senora Eleanor. Now it's my turn to stand by you. Whitman approached, smiling subtly. I'd say this is a perfect ending, wouldn't you agree? I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. After all the betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, the battle had ended. Justice had been restored, and kindness had been rewarded. Months later, I visited the nursing home where Vanessa had once tried to undermine me. She had been stripped of her legal claims and was living in a smaller apartment, the grandeur she once flaunted gone. I didn't gloat. That wasn't my way. Instead, I returned home to Rosa and our small garden, where the flowers bloomed brightly and the air smelled of fresh soil and freedom. You know, Senora Eleanor, Rosa said, kneeling to plant new seeds, we've faced a storm together, and now look at us. Safe, strong, and still standing. I smiled, feeling the warmth in my chest. It's proof, Rosa, that loyalty, kindness, and truth always triumph. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise. As we looked at the garden, the sun sparkling on the leaves, I realized that life could be cruel, but it could also reward those who held on to their integrity. And for the first time in months, I felt truly free. My fortune safe, my trust honored, and my spirit unbroken. Vanessa could threaten, lie, and scheme, but she had underestimated the strength of loyalty, love, and the quiet power of justice. And that, finally, was a lesson she would never forget.